Welcome to Matchback Systems podcast. In this episode, we're talking about the building block of marine container shipping, the container itself. And our industry expert has 40 years of experience in the container business, especially the sale and leasing of boxes and their use for space and storage. It's a pleasure to introduce our guest today, Fred Bauthier. Fred is the president and CEO of two companies. One is Equipe Container Services and the other is Moveable Container Storage. Welcome, Fred. Thanks very much for joining us.
Good morning, Heather. So, yes, I'll give you a little bit of background on Equipe Containers. We were in 2008. We decided to create a niche container leasing company that really addressed the end cycle of the container life. While we also we did some niche leasing and some finance and operating leases. We really thought that the predominant business for the leasing companies is really the first and second cycle of the container life, and the third cycle is which really is an important component of the financial success of a leasing product, is indeed the residual value, and that's where we decided to focus on. And in doing so, we also created a company called Moveable Container Storage, which is indeed a domestic company that's focused on portable storage. So on the international side, we provide operating leases, finance leases. We do project cargo, which could be anything from moving factories to moving dangerous goods. We also do recovery services. We were certainly involved in the Choyang recovery efforts and the Hanjin recovery efforts for both leasing company and financial institutions. And lastly, we also provide modifications, and we can talk a little bit about that. But so that's primarily the international, and on the domestic, we have Moveable Container Storage, and there we have a national footprint, and our primary business is portable storage and trading, basically selling the containers to the end users.
Okay, so now how widespread or how important is the role of containers in the portable storage sector?
So the sector, it's international, although the predominant, I shouldn't say that because it really is international, but in the US and Canada, there are more than 500,000 containers in the portable storage sector, and there, I dare say that's probably a very conservative estimate. It's nationwide. Well, it's in Canada as well as Mexico, as well as Latin America, and obviously Australasia, Europe. But for the U.S. market, it's a pretty vibrant business. There are 4 or 5 major portable storage companies with national footprints, and they're second tier ones. I would consider us as a second tier, but we do have we operate in 40 different plus locations in the U.S. And so it's a pretty solid business. Again, it utilizes international containers that are primarily no longer fit for maritime use. Although we do also bring in new equipment from Asia.
Okay, so the type of containers we're talking about, it's all marine containers only as opposed to domestic.
So yes, I think initially the portable storage market focused on trailers, but it quickly moved to standard 40s, high cubes, and 20-foot containers. The other product that we're now offering to the portable storage sector are what we call the GLOs, the ground level offices. They're basically offices that have been converted from marine containers and primarily used on construction sites. But those are pretty much the main products.
And where do you source the containers from, Fred?
So again, we have the ability to go to the leasing companies and or even our own containers that come off lease. As you know, typically the U.S. is predominantly inbound. There's an imbalance of containers, so there's typically a continual surplus of equipment in the U.S. So it's for the most part fairly easily. They're fairly accessible from the various leasing companies that do not want to continue putting their older fleet into the back into the marine sector. But having said that, we also do point-to-point sourcing. We'll source in Asia, whether it's new or from factory or from yards or inventory in Asia, and one-way lease into locations where we have requirements. Again, having a footprint of 40 plus locations, we have to be able to rifle shoot some of these containers into these very sometimes difficult locations because they're inland. For instance, Raleigh, North Carolina. Well, that's not exactly a shipping hub, but there are ways, and we find them to get containers into those difficult to reach otherwise locations.
Okay, and you provide containers to quite a range of customers in different industry segments. Can you tell us about some of the customers
Sure.
that you work with?
Traditionally, our largest customers were the retail stores, the sporting goods stores, the hobby stores, the Walmarts, the Targets, et cetera. Needless to say, with the COVID-19 and generally speaking, with the advent of Amazon and the ability for the consumer to buy direct from seller, the retail sector has been pretty much hit. So that, while it's still a very important part of our business, it's not as important. We also do construction business. We do a lot of probably a third of our business is directly related to construction. We do industrial, where we lease equipment to engineering firms. We also do municipal. That encompasses road projects, high schools or school systems. We do some work with DoD, Department of Defense. So we do some work with the military. And then we do the typical mom and pop. They're going to be moving. They need to store their goods for 3-4 months while they're building their house or they're fixing their house, which also brings it to the other side. We also do work with FEMA. And another kind of an example is, that's maybe topical in today's news is SpaceX was testing their rocket engines. Well, they needed a containment zone that if the thing blew up, they needed to have the ability to limit the impact of the engine blowing up. Well, that was our containers. So it's a pretty wide range, as you can see.
How cool, Fred. How cool is that? Fabulous.
So as you can see, I mean, there is a fairly big range, but the predominant is the retail. And as you would imagine, it is a seasonal business on the retail level. For instance, Walmart in Q4, in preparation for the Thanksgiving and the holiday season, the peak season cargoes, they need additional space. So they, on any given year, will take, a substantial quantity of equipment, 30,000, 40,000 containers, and across the U.S. and Canada. And so we have a huge volume in the Q4 with the retail sector.
Okay. Are there any sectors or specific customer segments where you've seen a particularly high or growing demand at the moment?
So obviously most of the retail sector is definitely hit pretty hard. Walmart still seems to be fairly robust, and they have, again, requirements coming up pretty much throughout the country. The construction business has not really slowed down so far this year, which is, considering the pandemic and considering the economy, the pretty volatile economy. We would expect to have seen a bit of a slowdown, but we've been pretty busy on that particular sector, and we also seem to be picking up a lot of business from businesses that are shutting down temporarily. They need temporary space, and it's a great place to have containers. It's a cheap form of warehousing. It's temporary. So for these types of users, it's a really great solution.
So you've seen, I mean, when we talked earlier, you mentioned an increased demand from importers. So, I mean, what do you put that down to? Is it goods put in storage because of a glut, or is it replenishing inventory, or part of an early peak season? What's your take?
Well, again, I mean, everything's relative. I mean, we're seeing a reasonably strong demand, but I think the market in general is smaller. I mean, obviously imports have significantly reduced, but there are still requirements, and you said it quite rightly. It is for in case of Walmart, it's for excess for the excess product for the season. But they also would do layaway programs where people store equipment or store their goods that they purchase on installment, and they keep them in our containers. Now, all these containers are basically terminated at the beginning of Q1, so it is a very seasonal use. So.
Okay.
In terms of, just generally, obviously, the international market, we definitely have seen a slowdown this year of movement from Asia to the U.S. In fact, it's been, in certain cases, problematic to get equipment from Asia to where we require them on a rapid and ongoing basis. So that, combined with the fact that the container prices in China have really been a veritable roller coaster from anywhere as low as 1,800 at the Q4 of last year to 2,400 today on a 20-foot container.
Wow.
So very volatile pricing, difficult, a little bit more challenging to move equipment from Asia to the U.S. Except for base ports, of course. It's always, if you want to move a container from China to LA, it's not too difficult.
And
So,
how do you see things, so there's been a slowdown, and how do you see things shaping up going forward? Any sort of signs that you've seen?
well, in terms of equipment pricing, I think obviously it's a demand supply equation. Shipping lines, I think, have done, they were a little bit concerned about lack of supply for peak season. So I think they did a fairly large amount of procurement, both directly with the factory and also via leasing companies. I think equipment pricing will eventually recede again. And in terms of overall demand for containers from Asia, to be determined. It's pretty hard to predict.
Yeah, I think everybody's struggling with planning in this environment. Now, I'm curious to know about the container modification part of your business. Explain to us, Fred, who has a need for a customized container and for what sort of purpose?
Okay, so for the very basic, I need a roll-up door and I need a man door so that I can access my goods easier without having to open container doors. That's the very basic. But we've done and are doing. We've done tiny houses. We've done power distribution equipment so that you can actually take containers on site and act as, if you will, a power. Basically, it's a 10-foot container that it's like a industrial size power strip, if you will. We've done battery, literally 40-foot high cube battery containers for energy storage. We've done turnstile security containers. We've done pop-up restaurants. We did one for the St. Louis Science Center. So again, it's amazing. If you can dream it, we can build it type thing.
Right.
There's just an amazing amount of things you can do with a container. They're so versatile.
Yeah. I was wondering if there'd be a demand from schools because they need additional space due to virus concerns.
Absolutely. It'll be, and we're actually still talking to various and sundry people for containers as affordable housing and transit housing. But we also have to be careful on the housing side because there's a lot of opposition at the municipal and county levels, people saying, well, do you really want to have people live in a container or in a box? And so there's, while it provides a very quick solution, it's not necessarily readily acceptable throughout the country. But we're working on that, and we've done a few projects in that regards as well. So, I
mean, you mentioned FEMA. I mean, do they use containers for temporary housing?
Absolutely, FEMA's during hurricane events. We see a lot of activity. Sometimes indirectly, not necessarily through FEMA, but yeah, FEMA is very much involved in anytime there's a significant event, whether it be fires or whether it be the hurricane season. There's a huge uptick in portable storage container requirements. We don't want to celebrate bad events, but unfortunately, they do need equipment again because it provides immediate available storage.
Okay, and then I also saw that you can make she sheds and man caves. I mean, it cracks me up, but I think that's great. What's the demand there?
I'm sorry.
I read that you provide she sheds. You can create a man cave by customizing a container. How much of a demand is there?
Yes. Or the man sheds and the she sheds.
Yes.
So yeah, it's a fun little product. Again, we've done a few of those in SoCal, in Southern California, where we actually did a tiny house for the Home and Garden TV. And that was a really fun project. And that was essentially meant to be a in-law that somebody would stick in their backyard for their in-laws, as opposed to a man shed or a she shed. But yes, those are fun little projects. And more and more people are kind of getting into it on a do-it-yourself basis, DIY basis. And there we provide guidance, provide containers. We tell them what they can or can't do. And but we don't get too actively involved in those projects just because of lack of time and focus. I mean, we want to go mostly with the industrial type projects.
Right. Okay. And that leads me to sort of finishing up with my last question, which is on sustainability, which is close to our heart at Matchback Systems. So your services are a great example of a circular economy. You extend the life and use of a container. So how important is the sustainability angle for your business, and how high is it on the agenda for your customers, Fred?
It's pretty high, and obviously what we do provide, for the most, I'd say 50% of what we use, more than 50% of our fleet is from containers that have no longer fit for maritime life, but have been repurposed. So there's a nice green angle there. The ability also to one-way lease from Asia without having to bring a container back to Asia by virtue of the fact that we're now converting it into a secondary product, is also a green angle that we try and promote. But the biggest one is obviously the repurposing of the containers and adding the value of the containers. So we feel like we do provide an overall value to both the shipping lines as well as the leasing sector in terms of the green angle, the repurposing and the ability to save on repositioning costs and take the containers where they are and add value to them, in not only in their third life, but in their sometimes difficult geographies, meaning in places where there's no export activity whatsoever.
Okay. All right, Fred. Well, it's been lovely talking with you. Thanks very much for a really interesting chat.
Thank you so much, Heather. Look forward to seeing you again soon.
Okay, just before we leave off, do you want to, for anybody who'd like to know more about your services, do you want to give out the website addresses for your companies?
Sure. The one for Equipe is www.equipecontainer.com. And the one for movable container storage is www.movablecontainers.com.
Perfect. Thanks, Fred.
Thank you so much, and we'll talk soon.
Yep.